They created the Big Boy, the largest steam locomotive ever built. In 1946, they controlled 26% of the diesel market. They invented the road switcher design that every modern locomotive still uses today. But by 1969, they were dead. One decision that destroyed 68 years of trust. You're about to see why having the best engineers means nothing if you don't listen to them. The empire built on steam. Picture 1901 America. You want to ship something across the country. You need trains. No highways. Just rails. And here's the thing. Whoever controlled locomotive building controlled America's economy. 8 locomotive companies were fighting each other. Brooks, Cook, Dixon, Manchester, Pittsburgh, Rhode Island, Richmond, and Schenectady Locomotive Works. They split a market that should have made them rich. June 3rd, 1901. These 8 companies joined forces. They became the American Locomotive Company. Schenectady Locomotive became the star. They instantly became the world's second largest locomotive builder. Only Baldwin was bigger. Alco had manufacturing capacity for over 1,000 locomotives per year. Multiple plants. Combined expertise. They were built to dominate. Want to see big? By World War II, Alco employed 15,000 workers. That jumped from just 5,950 in 1941. An entire city building, locomotives, tanks, and weapons for America. But their greatest achievement was still coming. Railroads needed more power. Freight trains got longer. Alco built the Big Boy locomotive. The numbers? 975 tons. That's heavier than 40 cars. 6,290 horsepower. More than most power plants. 132 feet long. Only 25 were ever built, all for Union Pacific. They used a 488 four-wheel setup. That's 4 front wheels, 8 drive wheels, 8 more drive wheels, 4 back wheels. The drive wheels stood 68 inches tall. And here's why that mattered. Union Pacific had a problem. Sherman Hill in Wyoming. Trains stalled halfway up. They needed locomotives to haul 3,600-ton freight trains. No helper engines. Nobody had ever built anything that powerful. Alco didn't just meet specs. They exceeded them. The Big Boy delivered 135,375 pounds of pulling force. No other locomotive in the world could match that. But Alco's real genius was about to show. Why did railroads need versatile locomotives? Railroads needed locomotives that could work anywhere. Freight yards, branch lines, main lines. One locomotive for everything. In 1941, Alco created the RS-1, the world's first road switcher locomotive. Every diesel locomotive you see today uses this basic design. The RS-1 had the cab in the middle. Good visibility both ways. It could pull freight trains or switch cars in yards. One locomotive, multiple jobs. This should have made Alco unstoppable. Why did Alco partner with GE? Diesel locomotives needed electrical systems. Alco built mechanical parts. General Electric built electrical parts. Together, they were unbeatable. In 1940, Alco and GE formed an official partnership. Alco provided locomotive bodies and engines. GE provided electrical systems and service networks. By 1946, the Alco-GE partnership controlled 26% of the diesel locomotive market. They were winning. Alco didn't just build locomotives. They invented the locomotive design still used today. They had the best partner in General Electric. They dominated when it mattered most. This combination seemed unstoppable. Best engineers, best partner, proven track record. By 1946, Alco was perfectly positioned. They owned 26% of the growing diesel market. They had GE's electrical expertise. They'd invented the road switcher. They should have won everything. So what went wrong? By 1946, Alco seemed destined to dominate the diesel era. They had innovation. They had a partnership. They had market share. But they also had something else, arrogance. And that arrogance was about to lead them into the biggest engineering mistake in locomotive history. A mistake that would cost them everything. The fatal engine decision. 1944, World War II, was ending. Railroads wanted to replace steam with diesel. Alco needed a new engine for the post-war boom. They made a decision that seemed smart at the time. It was actually corporate suicide. Here's what was at risk. Diesel engines are locomotive hearts. Get the engine wrong? Nothing else matters. The locomotive won't run. Customers won't buy. Your company dies. And Alco was about to bet everything on unproven technology. Why did Alco develop their own engine? Alco didn't want to pay licensing fees to other engine makers. They wanted more power than existing engines delivered. Between 1944 and 1945, Alco rushed development of their own engine, the 244, named for 244 cubic inches per cylinder. Higher power than EMD's proven 567 engine, Alco used advanced features, turbocharging, higher compression, everything their engineers could design for maximum power. On paper, it looked brilliant. Between 1946 and 1950, Alco sold locomotives with the 244 engine. Their FA and FB units looked great. The Black Widow paint became famous. Alco was winning early diesel sales, but something was happening in railroad shops. Why did the 244 fail? Higher power meant higher stress on every part. Alco's manufacturing couldn't maintain the precision needed. Crankshafts cracked under stress. Cooling systems couldn't handle turbocharged heat. Oil leaks became constant. Locomotives that should run 300,000 miles needed rebuilding every 90,000 miles. The problems multiplied. Oil leaks caused fires. Bearing failures destroyed engines. Welding defects in main bearing saddles caused block failures. Want to see how bad it got? Union Pacific had been Alco's biggest customer. They bought big boys. They trusted Alco quality. But by the early 1950s, UP made a devastating decision. They stopped buying Alco diesels entirely. Why? The 244 engine was unreliable. UP couldn't afford locomotives that spent more time broken than running. The 244 was like a Formula One race car. Incredible performance when everything worked, but Formula One cars break constantly. Railroads needed pickup trucks that ran every day. Why did Alco ignore the problems? Alco's engineers refused to admit their design was flawed. Admitting failure meant admitting their whole approach was wrong. Instead of fixing fundamental problems, they blamed railroads. You're not maintaining them right. You need better procedures. Meanwhile, EMD kept improving their proven 567 engine. Fewer failures, standard maintenance, parts available everywhere. But the worst was yet to come. General Electric watched Alco struggle with the 244. GE was frustrated with Alco's slow pace in developing a replacement. In 1953, GE dissolved their partnership with Alco. The announcement was quiet, but the impact was devastating. GE took over gas turbine projects. They kept selling components to Alco, but now as a customer, not a partner. GE had learned everything they needed from Alco. Here's the part that should terrify you. The 244 engine didn't just destroy Alco's reputation with railroads. It destroyed their partnership with General Electric. Alco lost their biggest customer and their most important ally because they rushed one product to market. This wasn't just bad engineering, it was strategic disaster. By 1955, railroad maintenance teams feared the Alco name. Purchasing agents avoided Alco bids. The company known for big boy reliability was now known for breakdowns. By 1956, Alco finally abandoned the 244 engine. They licensed a proven design from General Electric, the same General Electric that was now their competitor. But 12 years of reliability problems had poisoned the well, and GE was about to use everything they'd learned from Alco to destroy them. The competitor emerges. In 1956, Alco introduced their new 251 engine, reliable, powerful. Everything the 244 wasn't, but they had a bigger problem. Their former partner, General Electric, was now building locomotives to compete against them. Here's what Alco faced. Their reputation was destroyed. Their partner had become their enemy, and that enemy knew all their secrets. GE had studied Alco's designs for 13 years. Now, they were using that knowledge against them. Why was the 251 better? Alco licensed General Electric's proven Cooper-Bessemer engine design. No more risky in-house development. The 251 engine was actually excellent, reliable, efficient, still used in industrial applications today. Alco's Century Series locomotives, C420, C630, C636, were solid performers, better than EMD in some ways. So why didn't it work? Railroad purchasing agents had been burned. Maintenance teams remembered oil leaks and breakdowns. Even with a good engine, Alco couldn't rebuild trust. But GE was just getting started. Why did GE develop their own locomotives? GE quietly developed their own locomotive line. They learned locomotive manufacturing from Alco. Now, they'd use it against them. April 26, 1960. GE announced the U-25B, 2,500 horsepower, 100 more than anything EMD or Alco offered. How advanced was it? Modular electronics, self-cleaning filters, pressurized cab, second-generation technology that made Alco look obsolete. It was like teaching someone to cook in your restaurant, then watching them open a competing restaurant across the street using your recipes. Here's what happened to the locomotive market. EMD, still dominated with proven reliability. GE gained ground fast with advanced technology. Alco stuck in third place with damaged reputation. Why couldn't the market support 3 builders? Railroads were consolidating. They wanted standard locomotive fleets, identical maintenance, interchangeable parts. Alco still thought like craftsmen. Every locomotive is slightly different, custom solutions for specific problems. EMD and GE offered standardization, standard procedures, consistent reliability across entire fleets. Alco was fighting yesterday's war. The locomotive market couldn't support 3 major builders. Railroads wanted 2 suppliers for competitive bidding, not 3. EMD had history and reliability. GE had innovation and technology. Alco had neither advantage. Alco became the third choice. When railroads wanted alternatives to EMD, they chose GE. Watch Alco's market share disintegrate. 1950, 26%. 1955, 18%. 1960, 10%. 1965, 6%. GE's market share grew. 1960, 10%. 1965, 20%. 1970, 25%. The writing was on the wall. Alco tried everything. More powerful locomotives, lower prices, improved service, nothing worked. Their reputation couldn't recover from the 244 disaster. Alco built good locomotives after 1956. The 251 engine was reliable. The Century Series performed well, but reputation takes decades to build and seconds to destroy. The 244 had poisoned the well permanently. In 1964, Worthington Corporation acquired Alco. The locomotive pioneer needed outside money to survive. The writing was on the wall. Alco was fighting for survival. Their locomotives were finally reliable. But reliability came too late. The market had moved on. And in 1969, the last Alco locomotive would roll off the Schenectady production line. But the real tragedy? They almost had it all. The final collapse, January 1969. 2 locomotives rolled off Alco's production line. T6 switchers headed for the Newburgh and South Shore Railroad. They were the last Alco locomotives ever built in America. 68 years of locomotive history ended with a whimper. This is how great companies die. Not with explosions, not with drama. With quiet closure on a January morning. Alco's end teaches us that past success means nothing if you can't adapt to tomorrow. Alco couldn't sustain locomotive production with collapsing market share. By 1968, Alco built 50 to 100 locomotives yearly. EMD built 1,000 plus. GE built 500 plus. The math didn't work. Fixed costs were enormous. Revenue was insufficient. Every locomotive lost money. But here's the cruel irony. Alco's final locomotives were actually excellent. The C636 produced 3,600 horsepower, more than EMD's SD40. The 251 engine was reliable, but nobody cared anymore. Want to see the ultimate irony? In 1968, Rock Island Railroad bought C636s, the last Alco order. Rock Island needed power for grain trains, but couldn't afford EMD prices. Alco delivered 3,600 horsepower per unit, 25% more power than EMD SD40s. Lower purchase price. But Rock Island learned a harsh lesson. The locomotives spent twice as much time in repair shops. Higher power was useless if locomotives weren't running, like buying a sports car for daily commuting. Sure, it was faster than a sedan, but it broke constantly, parts cost more, and repair shops didn't know how to fix it. Why did the corporation give up? Worthington Corporation couldn't make Alco profitable. Studebaker Worthington formed in 1967. Alco became a semi-independent subsidiary. In 1969, Alco's locomotive division was shut down. Assets sold. Patents transferred. Montreal Locomotive Works bought Alco Designs. They continued building Alco-based locomotives until 1985. Schenectady's population declined by nearly one-third after Alco closed. Industrial contamination left environmental problems. Workers faced asbestos exposure throughout the plant's history. Why was demolition necessary? The Alco plant sat abandoned for decades. Environmental cleanup required complete demolition. In 2019, the vast Alco Schenectady complex was completely demolished. No trace remains of America's second-largest locomotive builder. Bulldozers erased 118 years of locomotive history. The company that built 75,000 locomotives left no physical legacy. But some things survived. Indian Railways still operates thousands of Alco design locomotives. Canadian National runs rebuilt Alco units from the 1950s. The RS-1 design influences every modern locomotive. Alco built the largest steam locomotive ever. They invented the road switcher design still used today. They had a partnership with General Electric. They controlled 26% of the diesel market, and they lost it all because they rushed one engine to market too fast. This is the ultimate business tragedy. Having everything, losing everything, all because of impatience. Alco's story isn't about market forces or foreign competition. It's about the cost of arrogance, the price of rushing to market, the danger of ignoring customer feedback. When the last Alco left Schenectady in January 1969, it marked more than the end of a company. It marked the end of American locomotive innovation, and what we lost might have been more valuable than what we gained. What died with Alco? Alco's death wasn't just the end of a company. It was the end of custom engineering in American railroading, and what we lost might be more valuable than what we gained. When Alco died, America lost something irreplaceable. Not just jobs, not just history. We lost the idea that engineering problems deserve engineering solutions rather than accounting solutions. Why was Alco's approach unique? Alco represented custom engineering for specific problems. Every locomotive solved a particular railroad's needs. That approach died with them. Modern locomotives are standard products. Take it or leave it. No customization, no special solutions. Railroads adapted to standard locomotives instead of locomotives adapting to railroads. Efficiency increased. Innovation decreased. The distinctive Alco diesel sound came from their 251 engine. Turbocharger whine plus exhaust note created a roar heard for miles. When Alco died, that sound disappeared from American railroads. Alco's engineering advances lived on. Road switcher design. Every modern locomotive uses it. Turbocharging became industry standard. High horsepower single units. Alco pioneered them. Here's the strangest part. Alco locomotives proved reliable when properly maintained. Indian Railways. Thousands of Alco design units still operating. Montreal Locomotive Works. Continued until 1985. Industrial applications. 251 engines still in use today, like a brilliant chef whose restaurant failed because they couldn't serve food fast enough. The recipes were perfect. The execution was flawed. Other countries took the recipes and made them work. Why is this lesson important? Alco's failure teaches us that engineering excellence without operational excellence is worthless. The best product doesn't always win. The most reliable product wins. The most serviceable product wins. Companies that survive balance innovation with simplicity. They solve customer problems rather than showcase engineering capabilities. Alco didn't fail because they couldn't build great locomotives. They failed because they couldn't build simple, reliable locomotives when it mattered most. Sometimes being the smartest engineer in the room means designing something dumb enough to work every time. Alco's arrogance, rushing the 244 to market, didn't just kill a company. It ended American locomotive innovation. We traded engineering creativity for manufacturing efficiency. Maybe that was inevitable. Maybe it was preventable. We'll never know. Alco's story isn't just about trains. It's about what happens when engineering pride meets market reality. It's about the cost of rushing to market. It's about the price of losing customer trust. And those lessons matter more today than ever before. 75,000 locomotives. The big boy. The road switcher design. A partnership with General Electric. 26% market share. Alco had everything a company could want, and they lost it all because they couldn't wait to properly test one engine. The 244 disaster teaches us that reputation takes decades to build and seconds to destroy. Customer trust is your most valuable asset, and rushing to market can cost you everything.